My name is Gregory, and this happened last December when I was home alone in my house for a whole week. My girlfriend had gone to stay with her parents for the holidays, and I stayed behind because of work. I live in a quiet neighborhood in a small town in upstate New York. The houses are pretty spaced out, and most of the people on my block go away for Christmas, so I basically had the whole street to myself. At first I liked the idea of the peace and quiet. I thought I would get a lot of rest and maybe catch up on some shows and just enjoy the coziness of the holidays for a bit. What happened that week still lives rent-free in my head. It was on my second night alone. It was already completely dark outside. It had been snowing lightly all day, and there was a white layer on my yard and driveway. I was in the kitchen making a simple dinner, just pasta and chicken. Usually my girlfriend is the one that cooks our meals. I'm not much of a chef. I turned on the TV in the background to make the house feel less empty, because as happy as I was to have the place to myself for a bit, I wasn't used to it being so empty and quiet. While I was eating at the table, I heard something unusual. It really took me a second to figure out what it was. It sounded like singing, so I muted the TV and listened. The sound was definitely coming from outside. The singing got a little clearer, and I realized the person was singing Jingle Bells. At first I thought maybe some neighborhood kids were playing around outside, but the voice didn't sound like a kid. It sounded like a grown man. I got up and walked toward the front door because that seemed like the direction it was coming from. The closer I got, the louder it became. By the time I reached the door, it sounded like the singing was coming from right on my front stoop. I felt a weird feeling in my stomach, but at that moment I still thought maybe it was just a caroler. I opened the door. Standing in the glow of my porch light was a man in his mid-30s. He wore no hat, and his coat looked too thin for the weather. But the strangest thing was that he was completely focused on singing Jingle Bells, staring down at my welcome mat like he wasn't even aware I had opened the door. I remember forcing a little smile because I didn't really know what else to do. I'd never gotten Christmas carolers before, and even then I had never heard of a grown man doing it solo. It's supposed to be a group thing. From what I could tell, he didn't look dangerous. He actually just looked confused or maybe slow. I even wondered if he was special needs because he didn't react to me being there. He just kept singing. When he finished the song, I expected him to say something or at least leave, but he just took a breath and started singing Jingle Bells all over again from the beginning in the same slow, off-key tone. This time, he was looking directly at me. My smile dropped because it was just weird now. I stood there another minute, pretending to listen even though it felt uncomfortable. I kept thinking he would stop, but he didn't. He just looped the song. I checked my phone and realized several minutes had passed while he sang Jingle Bells over and over. Finally, I decided it was enough. I thanked him in a polite tone and slowly closed the door. I thought that would send him on his way. But once the door was closed, I still heard the singing. It continued without even slowing down. I went back to the table and sat down, trying to ignore it, but the longer it went on, the harder it was to ignore. The man didn't seem normal, and it bothered me that he was still right outside my door singing the same song. I wondered if maybe someone else was with him, but I didn't see anyone. It made the whole house feel uncomfortable, like someone strange was standing too close to my personal space. I kept eating, but I couldn't focus on the food. After a long stretch of time, the singing finally stopped. The sudden silence made me jump because I had gotten used to the sound. I walked back to the front door window. When I looked outside, I expected to see the man gone, but he was still there. He had moved. Now he was standing at the end of my driveway, facing my house, completely still. He was no longer singing. Something about that felt worse than the singing. He looked like he was waiting. I opened the door a crack and told him he couldn't be there and needed to leave because it was private property. He didn't move at all. I finally warned him that if he didn't leave, I would call the police and shut the door. I watched him from the window, but he didn't budge. I didn't want to actually call the cops because I thought something might be mentally wrong with him and I didn't want to make things worse. Instead, I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and tried to relax. Before changing into bedclothes, I checked the window. The man was gone. I figured the threat worked. I got into bed, turned on a lamp, and started reading. A short while later, I heard singing again from behind the house. I instantly knew what it was. It was the same man singing Jingle Bells, this time from my backyard. I jumped out of bed and went to the back window. When I looked down, he was standing in the snow directly below my bedroom window, already looking straight up at me while he sang. I slid the window open and yelled that I was calling the police. The singing stopped instantly. He stood there in complete silence, then suddenly burst into a full sprint toward the back door. As soon as he was out of view, he started screaming, an insane, deranged scream that echoed across the yard and through the entire house. Then came the banging. The back door shook violently as he kicked and slammed into it. I could feel the vibrations upstairs. I realized he wasn't just acting strange. He was trying to get inside. I grabbed my phone and called the police, begging them to hurry. I stayed on the line while holding a baseball bat and backing into my bedroom closet. The operator told me to stay hidden. I could still hear the screaming and banging downstairs, and every second felt like he was about to break through. Then suddenly, it all stopped. Everything went silent except for my breathing. I stayed completely still until the police arrived. They checked the house and confirmed the back door was still locked. Outside, we saw deep footprints in the snow showing exactly where he had stood and where he had run. The footprints led into the woods behind my property. The cops followed the trail briefly but decided not to go deep into the woods at night. They acted like it wasn't a big deal and told me people act strange all the time. That bothered me, but I was too shaken to argue. After they left, the house felt horribly empty and cold. I locked every door and window and checked them over and over. I went to my parents' place for Christmas Eve and Christmas. The man never returned, at least not that I know of. This story is about my Christmas experience from about 10 years ago. I was 6 years old since my birthday was in November and I had just finished celebrating. We were getting ready for the holiday. My birthday happened on the same day as the famous Odell Beckham Jr. catch. I lived with Cowboys fans, but I was a Giants fan. It was talked about for the rest of the night and even during my birthday celebration. It was an eventful birthday week and I'm surprised I remember all of this since I was only 6. I didn't understand football, but I understood that the catch was crazy, so I was just living in the moment and happy. For my birthday, I got tickets to a Mavericks vs. Wizards NBA game. I was a Cavaliers fan, but since we lived outside of Dallas, I knew a lot of Mavericks fans. I was grateful it was going to be my first NBA game. Christmas Day had already passed and I got a brand new Odell Beckham Jr. jersey and a Mavericks shirt and sweatshirt as I was becoming a sports fan. I had a great Christmas, and one of my gifts was another Mavericks game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. I was so excited to go to both games. The day came and we went to the game. The Mavericks won a close one. It was crazy to see an event like that in an NBA arena for the first time. We left the game and drove home, which was maybe 45 minutes away from the American Airlines Center. The next couple of days were normal, but I was excited to go back to that amazing stadium and atmosphere. This time we went again. I didn't know it would be the last time I went for years. At the last game we had nice seats, about 7 rows from the court and right in the middle. But this time we were maybe row 20 and in a corner area, so the experience was different. The game was going well and I was enjoying it. The Mavs were killing them by like 20 to 30 points at halftime. Since I was a child, I always wanted to roam around, get food, and go to the bathroom by myself. But I was with my parents and only 6 years old. So my parents and I walked to get some food. We waited in line for maybe 20 minutes. My dad went to another restaurant inside the arena to get different food, and I stayed with my brother who was waiting in line to pay. As we talked to the worker, I walked away to throw out some of the candy they bought me before the game. I went to a trash can maybe 30 feet away. As I got there, this tall white man came up to me and asked, "Hey, are you lost?" I shook my head and didn't say anything. He said he didn't see my parents around and told me, "Let's go look," as he grabbed my hand and walked with me. I was just a kid, so I walked with him. He took me toward the nosebleeds and said we were going to the intercom so they could announce my name and my parents. I said okay and kept walking. We got to the top and waited for about 10 minutes. He waited until the coast was clear and then tried pushing me toward the emergency stairs or elevator. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember there was no one around. Then I remembered stranger danger, and the guilt and fear started sinking in. I realized I shouldn't go with this man. He didn't have any credentials. When he let go of my hand to check his phone, I ran all the way back to the stands. As I ran, I saw him standing there with a small grin on his face. I couldn't find my parents, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be somewhere safe. I found my brother, who hadn't told my parents he lost me because he didn't want to get in trouble. He asked if I was okay and I said yes, choosing not to say anything. The game ended and the Mavs won, but I didn't care. I just wanted to go home. As we exited, I was quiet. When we got in the car, I was also quiet. My parents seemed confused that I didn't seem energetic, but I told them I was tired. As we drove home, I almost fell asleep, but then a loud honk screeched behind us. It was so loud I almost screamed. I turned around and there he was, the same man driving a truck with maybe 3 other men inside. I couldn't tell who they were, just silhouettes. My parents yelled at them from our car when they pulled up next to us, but the men just stared. I wanted to say something so badly, but for some reason I didn't. When we got home, I went right to sleep and passed out fast. In the middle of the night, I woke up with chills. I noticed a light flashing at my window. I looked out expecting something innocent, like Santa Claus or something, but instead I saw that man standing there shining a flashlight into my bedroom window. I screamed and ran to my parents' room, telling them someone was at my window. Since it was a first-story window, they rushed outside and searched for maybe 20 minutes. They didn't find anything, and since I was a kid, they didn't believe me. They said it must have been a shadow from a car, but I know what I saw. On New Year's Eve a couple of days later, we were staying up until midnight to watch the ball drop. We were about 5 or 6 minutes away from midnight when the doorbell rang. My parents answered it. I didn't pay attention until I heard the man's voice, and I was 100% sure it was him. I told my parents, but they didn't believe me. I told them that at the game he brought me to the high level and I ran away and escaped, but they still didn't believe me. They said it was just a man handing out lost dog flyers for his cousin's dog. The night went on and I was fine, but then a year later on New Year's Eve, there was a knock at my bedroom window. Keep in mind, I had forgotten about the situation. I got up and looked, and there was a piece of paper on the window that said, "This new year you'll meet me again." I gave my parents the note and they filed a report, but they never heard anything back. Every couple of years I get terrified of New Year's Eve, thinking that man will come back. I told my parents I never want to go back to an NBA game, saying it wasn't my thing. But now I'm 16, and it scares me that the man knows where I live. I'm considering going to the Cavs versus Mavs game on January 2nd or 3rd, which would be my first game since then, but I'm not sure. This experience scared me away from basketball and made me always close my curtains. I remember this night way too clearly, and even now I think about how close my family came to something really terrible. It was early December, and we decided to drive up north into the mountains to cut down a real Christmas tree. It was something my wife Marianne and I always wanted to do, and our 7-year-old son Andrew was excited about it too. The weather was cold and cloudy, and the sky had that heavy look where it feels like snow is always about to fall again. To us, that added to the Christmas vibe. The whole ride up the winding roads made me feel like a kid again. It had been a while since I'd done something this unique and in the Christmas spirit, and having Andrew so excited about it just brought me back to my youth. When we finally reached the remote area Marianne found online, there were no other cars around in the parking area. There were a bunch of light posts scattered around, so we weren't in pitch-black darkness. That's why we picked the place. Still, we did bring flashlights. We parked by a small unmarked path that led deeper into the trees. There was a lot of snow on the ground still from the snowfall a few days earlier, and up this high, the snow took even longer to melt. Andrew jumped out of the car right away and started throwing snowballs at us, so I started throwing them back. We were there to have fun, and I wanted to make it as memorable as possible for Andrew. I grabbed our flashlights and the axe I planned to use to chop down a tree. We walked up the narrow path with snow crunching under our boots. Andrew kept running ahead, stopping to point at trees he thought might be perfect. The deeper we went, the more the road behind us disappeared, and the only light came from the faint moon glowing behind thick clouds. It was so quiet that I even asked Marianne and Andrew to stop for a second just to really take it in. There was not a single sound, maybe just a light breeze. To be honest, if I had been there alone, I'd have been slightly creeped out just from the silence and darkness. We had to rely fully on our flashlights. Andrew was having fun with his until the parking lot light disappeared and everything around us was total darkness. He started to get a little nervous and asked how far we were going to go, commenting on how dark it was. I kept feeling like someone was watching us or like something was walking behind us, but every time I turned around there was nothing, just the empty snow-covered path. About 10 minutes in, we finally found a spot where the trees were tall and full. Andrew ran around them in circles looking for the best one. Marianne stayed closer to me and whispered that she wanted to pick a tree fast because she had a weird feeling too, and I knew exactly what she meant. This was a lot creepier than I had imagined. Right then I heard soft crunching behind us. It wasn't any of us, nor was it an animal. It sounded like boots crunching the snow, but very slowly sneaking. When I turned around, I saw a man in dark clothes standing about 20 feet back on the path. He wasn't dressed for the weather. His hands were bare and red from the cold. His jacket looked more like a windbreaker. His face looked pale and stiff, like he'd been out in the cold for way too long. Marianne grabbed Andrew's arm to pull him closer. When the man noticed we were looking at him, he suddenly smiled in an off-putting way and stepped closer. He asked if we were looking for a Christmas tree. His voice, breaking the already unsettling silence, was uncomfortable. His voice was deep and kind of soft. Before I could say anything, Andrew answered yes, excited again, and I felt a jolt of panic because I didn't want this man knowing anything about us. Marianne quickly told him no, that we were just walking. The man stepped closer, again, and the way he moved made every hair on my arm stand up. He told us not to worry because he wasn't a park ranger. He said it like he could tell exactly why we lied, because admittedly what we were doing was super illegal. I didn't want to talk to him at all. Something was wrong with him. He looked hungry or desperate or like he hadn't slept in days. I guess, for lack of a better word, he looked homeless. I told Marianne we should head back to the car and she nodded, gripping Andrew's jacket. When we started walking past the man, he stood by, smiling and watching, giving slight nods as if to say goodbye. As we walked, Andrew kept turning around, asking if the man was following, and we told him to stay facing forward every time. When I looked back, the man was a little bit closer than before, even though I didn't hear him speed up. I whispered to Marianne that when we reached the main road, we had to run to the car. She held Andrew's hand tighter and nodded without looking back. The man stayed behind us the whole time, dragging a little like his boots were too big or too heavy. Once we got close enough to see the gap in the trees where the car was parked, I told them to go. Marianne lifted Andrew and ran as fast as she could. The only reason I felt even remotely safe was because of the axe in my hand. But I'm not a violent person, and I've never had to resort to violence in my entire life. I turned around to block the path behind us for even just a second. The man had stopped walking and was just staring at me, and he put his hands up halfway, still smiling. Then he said, "I mean no harm, why don't you get back to your truck now?" I felt my heart skip a beat as he said this. He said truck like he knew we came in a pickup truck. I replied simply that we didn't want any trouble. Then I turned and started hurrying back down to the lot. But halfway there Marianne screamed my name, sounding panicked. When I got to the truck, she showed me that both right side tires were punctured. I didn't have time to examine it long before realizing it was him. I told Marianne to call 911 immediately, but she struggled to find service at first. She walked around the snowy lot for a bit until there was reception. She never strayed too far away. I had Andrew wait in the truck, who was now clearly concerned as he watched Marianne and I freaking out. He was old enough to know something bad was happening. Marianne seemed to be having a hard time on the phone, so I took it and explained our location and that we felt threatened by a random man in the woods who may have potentially been responsible for the tires. Given the potentially unstable individual in the vicinity and the fact that we had a child with us, police were taking this very seriously and told me to keep my family locked in the truck until police arrived, and that a tow truck would be sent as well. I was instructed to keep the operator on the line while we waited, but eventually the line started getting choppy, cutting out because of the poor reception. Then Marianne suddenly screamed in my ear to look and pointed toward the tree line by the path we were on. There were multiple people standing just beyond the tree line. I counted at least 3. They looked like shadows from where we were, which made the sight even more terrifying. It was like we were being stalked and hunted. Then 2 of the people started walking closer. I told the operator, and she said something that really made me uncomfortable. She asked if I had any kind of weapons, and when I said I had the axe, she implied that if it came down to it, I should use it to defend my family. By this point, Andrew was crying and Marianne tried to calm him down. I told the operator that 2 of the figures were still walking toward the truck. They weren't running or yelling or anything. They just walked very slowly, like they knew we weren't going anywhere. The 3rd figure strangely disappeared, likely backing deeper into the woods away from the light. The operator told me the police were close, but I had no idea if that meant 2 minutes or 10. I kept looking back and forth between the tree line and the road in the distance, praying to see flashing lights. I tried to talk to the operator again, but the call dropped the second it cut off. Everything felt 100 times worse. I locked the doors again, even though they were already locked. I kept my hand on the axe, gripping it so hard my knuckles hurt. As the 2 people were now within range of hearing them speak, we could hear them saying, "We're here to help," as they waved their hands in the air. We didn't recognize either of them as the guy from earlier. "Do you think they're park rangers?" Marianne asked, and I said firmly, "Not a chance." Perhaps I said it too loud because Andrew started crying even more, which Marianne had to try extra hard to console him. These 2 people approaching were dressed similarly to that first guy, way underdressed. Their clothes looked worn out, almost dirty, and they didn't seem bothered by the cold at all. Then, seemingly randomly, the 2 of them turned around and started running back in the direction they had come from. We didn't know why just yet, but it was soon clear. Never have we been so ecstatic to hear the sound of police sirens. It was getting louder fast, and eventually we saw the flashing lights coming from down the road, coming pretty fast actually. The police SUV entered the lot with its spotlight on, and it instantly shined in our direction. I flashed my lights to try to get the officer to see the men running back into the woods. At this point, though, they were already nearly gone, but their footprints weren't. Once the SUV was next to us, 2 officers jumped out immediately with flashlights drawn. I got out, thanking them, and pointed in the direction the men ran. I said they disappeared into the trees like they had. The police told us to stay inside the police had us stay in the truck while they searched, and more units showed up. Within minutes, 1 officer stayed with us. Andrew was no longer scared, but rather once again excited at the commotion and the sight of police officers. After a long search, the police came back and told us what I already knew they were going to say. They didn't find anyone, just tracks in the snow that went deep into the woods and eventually spread out in different directions. They didn't know if the people lived somewhere out there or if they were part of some kind of camp deeper in the mountains. They said sometimes drifters or squatters stay hidden in remote areas during the winter. The tow truck eventually arrived and the police stayed around us. The entire time until our truck was loaded up, we had to sit in the back of a patrol car to stay warm while they finished everything. No one really said much. Marianne held Andrew in her lap and I just stared out the window, watching the dark tree lines, half expecting to see someone standing there again. On the ride back home, none of us talked. It was like all of us were afraid that saying anything out loud would make it real again. We didn't try to cut down a Christmas tree ever again. We didn't even go back to that mountain area. Even now, 10 years later, I refuse to go anywhere near it. To this day, what scares me the most is the thought that they had been watching us long before we even noticed them. They saw us arrive in that parking lot because they knew to strand us by slashing my tires, and they were waiting for us to go deep enough into the trees so we wouldn't make it back to the truck. We were lucky we trusted our instincts enough and decided to leave for the truck almost right away. We were also lucky I was holding an axe, which may have dissuaded them from doing something crazy. I don't like thinking about how close we came to potentially never going home. I still think about this one night from when I was 9 years old. It was a few days before Christmas. My parents both had things to do that night, and since I was almost 9, they felt okay leaving me home for a little bit. My mom had to run to the grocery store to get some stuff for Christmas dinner, and my dad was working late like he usually did in December. I was sitting on the couch watching a Christmas movie and eating cookies by the fireplace, with the Christmas tree lit up. It was already dark even though it was still relatively early, and I remember the Christmas lights flashing on the houses across the street. Everything was normal until the doorbell rang. The only reason this made me stop and look was because it was rather late and random for someone to ring the bell, and my mom always told me never to answer the door when I was alone. My parents never rang the bell since they had keys. I got up and walked to the door anyway because I wanted to look through the peephole. When I put my eye up to it, I saw there was a man standing on the porch wearing a Santa Claus suit. It was the full thing too. The red coat, the hat, the beard, everything. But he didn't look like a normal, friendly Santa. He wasn't holding anything besides what looked like a clipboard, and he was standing way too close to the door, like he was waiting for me to unlock it. I didn't know what to say at first, so I just kind of whispered, "Who is it?" The man moved his head a little closer to the door, like he was trying to see through the peephole or hear me better. In that moment, he figured out right away that I was a kid. He did what I guess was his best Santa impression as he said he was Santa, that he had gifts for me, and that I should open the door. At 9 years old, I wasn't stupid and I didn't believe in Santa anymore. My parents had taught me about strangers. I told him to go away and that I didn't need anything. I tried to sound brave, but my voice cracked. The man went silent for a second, and then he asked me if I was home alone. As soon as he said that, I knew I had messed up. I instantly felt stupid for even letting him know I was home. I didn't answer him. I stepped back from the door and walked quickly to the living room because I suddenly felt too scared to stand near it. I sat on the couch and grabbed a pillow and stared at the TV, like acting normal would make the fear go away. But then I heard the doorknob twist. He was testing if the door was locked. I wanted to scream for help, but nobody was home. I waited and hoped he would leave. But a moment later I heard another sound from the back of the house. It was the back door knob twisting. It happened so fast after the front door that I bet he ran around the house to the back. That door was even weaker than the front one and we almost never used it. I felt frozen in place, and all I could think about was that my house only had 2 doors and this man was trying both. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and dialed my mom's number. When she answered, I started talking really fast, trying not to cry. I told her someone was trying to get into the house and that he was dressed like Santa. My mom got serious right away and told me she was coming home immediately and that I should not open any doors no matter what. She told me to stay in the living room and keep the curtains closed. I sat on the floor behind the couch where I couldn't be seen from any windows, and I stayed completely still. I kept hearing small noises outside, like footsteps or light taps, just sounds that told me someone was still there. Eventually, the noises stopped. Not long after that, I heard a car pull into our driveway, and I knew it was my mom because I recognized the sound of her brakes. I stayed where I was until I heard the front door unlock and slam open. My mom came in breathing hard and holding 2 grocery bags. She locked the door behind her and yelled my name, and I ran to her immediately. She hugged me and then told me she had just seen a man dressed as Santa walking down our street. She said she slowed her car down when she saw him and yelled at him out the window, asking what he was doing. The man told her he was going door to door asking for donations, but she didn't believe him for a second. She said he looked nervous and walked away quickly when she started yelling. My mom told me she was proud of me for not opening the door and for calling her right away. She called the police and reported the man, and I'm sure the police at least surveyed the area. We never found out if he was arrested or if he just disappeared into the neighborhood. 2 neighbors later said that the man knocked on their doors asking for donations, though they said it seemed like a scam. Regardless, that doesn't change the fact that he tried to get into our house, where he knew a little boy was home alone. I still think about that night every year around Christmas when I see Santa decorations. I remember being 9 years old and knowing that the man on our porch was not Santa and that he wanted something else. I guess I was lucky the doors were locked and my mom got home when she did. What would have happened if that door was unlocked is terrifying to think about.